Here are your hosts, Kyle Fellows and Andrew Mertig. This is the Draft Fellows Podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Draft Fellows Podcast. I'm Andrew Mertig. That is Kyle Fellows, I guess that way. And together, we are the Draft Fellows. Make sure to follow our channel on YouTube, or you can always check out the audio version on your favorite podcasting platform. We're excited to be back. But before we jump into the topic, Kyle, we are by the time we're recording this, less than 24 hours away from NFL kickoff. We had some really exciting college football this past weekend. It's here.
It's here. Fall is here. Like you said, we get the college football landscape. And then, of course, whenever this drops, we've got Thursday football. And then just because the NFL loves us, we get Friday football. And so just a full weekend of NFL to welcome us back to our obsession that we all love. So it's going to be a good weekend.
Yeah, and last year, the Chiefs and the Lions kicked the season off with a really, really fantastic matchup. I think the Chiefs-Ravens has the potential to be equally as good. And then the Friday game, Philadelphia-Green Bay, I think two teams that have a lot to say when it comes to NFC contention. I think that's going to be really exciting as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We just got the news that Green Bay has landed in Brazil. And so you can just taste the football is almost here. I feel like this offseason has kind of been, it almost feels longer in some ways. Maybe it's just the anticipation building, but we are here. We get real football this weekend. So, Andrew, let's spend our time, because we've waited so long, let's not talk about what's actually happening. Let's look forward to 2025 because that's how we're just crazy and that's where our heads go. Let's talk a little bit of quarterbacks. What's going to happen as we flip the page next year? Like, who's going to be looking for one?
Yeah, so when we last joined you, we took a look ahead at the teams in the AFC who might be in the market for a quarterback in the 2025 offseason. And obviously, a lot is going to change in the coming months, especially about these first few teams we're going to talk about. But it is interesting to look at the upcoming free agents and the rookie quarterback class to see what teams might be identifying a need there and then might be addressing that. So as we start to look at, free agency projections and mock drafts and those kind of things in the upcoming weeks and months, I think it's important to know who might be in the market there because it changes so much in the landscape of who makes what moves in the offseason. Mm-hmm. So as I mentioned, we talked about the AFC last time, so we're going to start in the NFC East with probably the most controversial team on this entire list all across the NFL, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. Is Dak Prescott coming back next year, Kyle?
Man, what a question, right? Like, quarterbacks of this caliber don't get to the market. Like, it doesn't happen. Dallas has been weird about this, though, and, they just paid CeeDee Lamb. And they've got to make a big decision about Micah Parsons. Micah Parsons isn't leaving Dallas. They love that they made that draft pick and that he's turned into the player that can impact the game in so many different ways. So it kind of feels like maybe, it feels like they were thinking maybe Trey Lance could be the guy. And they played with that idea and but it just kind of feels like maybe they think that they've gotten to the doorstep of the big game a couple times and haven't been able to finish. And maybe they move on. I don't know. What do you think? Does Dallas actually pull the trigger on moving on to a young quarterback, a different veteran quarterback? What could they do here?
Dallas and Cincinnati kind of fall into the bucket of the teams that don't necessarily take care of their players the way their star players, the way that we feel like they should. And I don't know what the sense of that is. They kind of strung CeeDee Lamb along all offseason. I'm sure Micah Parsons feels a certain type of way about not having a contract yet. And Dak Prescott is the most questionable because, yes, he is going to be very expensive. But if they had done the contract right the first time when he was holding out, they would have saved themselves some more money and they would have pushed the timeline ahead. And they might have been able to get out in front of some of the contracts that were given out. Because what we know is every time a new promising quarterback, especially in that elite tier where you can question if Dak is the top 5 quarterback, but he's in the upper echelon. And anytime a quarterback like that it's their turn to get a contract, they're going to reset the market. So the longer you wait, the more you're going to have to pay. And I don't know what Dallas is waiting for. And I just feel like if they were going to get it done, they would have gotten it done before the start of the season. And to this point, I mean, they have 2 or 3 days. Doesn't sound like they're negotiating much right now. And so it's going to come down to, do they want to, like, not just reset the market, but reset the market considerably? Because, you know, people talk about a 20% surcharge when somebody hits the open market. It's not going to be that for quarterbacks, because 20%
Right.
astronomical. But we're probably talking 60 million AAV. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you deal with that if you're Dallas. And so I think there's maybe it's a 50-50 chance at this point.
Yeah, no, which sounds totally crazy. To me, like Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks always talk about the tractors, trailers conversation with quarterbacks. And to me, Dak is kind of like right at the borderline to me. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe there's some like memories in my head that like lead me to like push him further down the list. I think he's a really good quarterback, but I can see where it's this murky area for Dallas. Like, what do we do? Because like making him a $60 million quarterback probably leaves a strange taste in their mouth. But like, we know that Dallas is too good to pick high, and like no other quarterbacks, like Dak Prescott's, don't get to the market. So he is the quarterback that would get to the market, like that would allow them to, you know, there's not going to be that guy to replace him. So it's just going to be fascinating, but you get why they're hesitant. But NFL teams can't really usually afford to move on when they're in the situation that Dallas is in. Dak is going to be 32 years old in the middle of the offseason next year. So you're looking at like, you know, 3-4 year deal from whoever probably makes that decision. Is another team going to do it? Maybe in a way that makes him more interested than Dallas. It'll just be really fascinating to see where he ends up and how Dallas handles it and where they view themselves as an organization in general. So fascinating all around. This division is interesting in general, Andrew. Like, what are the Giants doing this time next year?
Well, I would think that this is finally the prove it season, because the Giants way overperformed. They kind of were put in a difficult position. I think they made the wrong move in paying Daniel Jones, and that's certainly what it looked like last year. But now they're going to say, okay, we're really going to give you at least some weapons this season. We're going to bring in Malik Neighbors. We're going to hope that, you know, the rest of the pieces are good enough. We're going to invest in that offensive line, and we're going to say, show us you're worth it. I think the expectation of New York fans is that Daniel Jones is gone at the end of this year. I think he has a chance to prove himself, because the contract is going to put him in a situation where if he plays well enough, the Giants probably won't feel forced to move on. If he doesn't play well enough, it's an easy decision. I think it's fascinating from taking a look at, you know, a head coach and a GM that are probably both on the hot seat this year. And, you know, now they're forced to rely on Daniel Jones instead of potentially taking the rookie quarterback, which Hard Knocks offseason made it seem like that was their preference.
Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. I think the Giants will find themselves in a place where I think it would take a significant leap from Daniel Jones to make the Giants feel like that he was the future. But I am curious for Daniel Jones' sake, does he get another shake somewhere in kind of like a Oakland situation from this year, right? Where like Gardner Minshew has a chance to be the starter. They let Aiden O'Connell compete just because like until they added Malik Neighbors, this was a team that was pretty devoid of talent in a lot of places and really struggled to protect him as well. I'm not saying Daniel Jones becomes the next Baker Mayfield or something like that, but I do wonder in another situation if he were to drop into like a situation like San Francisco, which I know is ideal and like, you know, that's not, you don't come across those situations very often, but could Daniel Jones be a serviceable NFL quarterback and cut down on, you know, the turnovers and stuff? I don't know. I'm more curious for his future than I am for his future with the Giants, because I think that chapter has kind of already been written.
Yeah, and just a quick follow up on the Jones contract. it looks like a pre-June 1st release is probably not in the cards because that would be a negative $21.5 million savings. So they'd have to eat all of that, sort of the Russell Wilson-ish move, maybe a little bit less as disadvantageous as that one.
Yeah.
A post-June 1st release is basically a net neutral. They get $750,000 in savings. So essentially they're just swallowing it, but they're also pushing out a 2025 dead cap of 22 million. So kind of like, do you want to, take your medicine now or take it later? Trades probably work a little bit better in their favor, but you'd have to find a team that's willing to take on that contract. And even if there's not a lot of guaranteed money going forward, and I'm not familiar enough to know what that is, I think that would be very, very difficult when a team could say, well, we could probably sign this guy to a, Tampa Bay Baker Mayfield of 2023 kind of contract.
Okay, hypothetically, Matthew Stafford retires, the Rams throw. I mean, it's not like an ideal, but like you go for, you're a good team, they probably make the playoffs. Throw someone like Daniel Jones in. For Daniel Jones' sake, I would just love to see something like that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, there are some like worthwhile tools here, and could he be a quarterback a la Ryan Tannehill, who figures it out a little bit later in his career? Remember, like Miami was done with him. He was basically like, this is not a starting level quarterback, and Tennessee was like, no, we can work with him. And they made the most of that situation. Now, I don't know exactly what the Giants cap situation is for next year. It looks like for 2025, there's a point here, I promise. I'm just waiting for things to load. So they have about $44 million projected in cap room, and there's some figures on here that I think they could work with to create more money. Could the Giants be a competitor for Dak Prescott?
Oh my gosh. If they burn him, what an opportunity for him to be like, you know what, I'm going to go play with Malik Neighbors. I'm going to go play with, a guy who has had a lot of success with quarterbacks in the past. If, Dable ends up staying and those kinds of things. But that's the fear, but also the reality of the situation in the NFL. If you let your quarterback go, it could come back to haunt you, not only within the conference, but also within the division. That would be so much fun. And, you'd have all kinds of primetime games with that.
Yeah, and this isn't even an exclusive list, but I mean, we've already talked about the Raiders. We talked about the Giants. We talked about the Titans. If you let Dak Prescott go, the bidding war is going to be incredible. And I think for that reason, the Cowboys, I mean, they should have gotten this done 6 to 12 months ago, but really, I think that the time is now if you think you're going to have Dak back at all, because there's just nothing else you can do. All right, so we will move on. The rest of these teams actually are going to go relatively quickly. So Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts, can't imagine anything's changing there.
Yeah, probably staying the same.
And then you have the top 2 picks in the draft. You have Washington with Jaden Daniels. Certainly, unless something catastrophic happens there, please, Jaden Daniels, learn how to get down.
Slide.
It's okay to go out of bounds, slide, take care of yourself. Please, I want to see this guy in the league for a very long time.
Yeah, he's not built like that. It's one thing if you're built like a truck and all right, you're going to run people over, but the dude is not. So you have to understand that about yourself, but hopefully he does, because all signs point to him having a really good rookie year already.
Yeah. If I'm Cliff Kingsbury or whoever Washington's quarterback coach is, I am showing Lamar Jackson clips every single day in the film room. Look at how he is getting down.
Yeah. And he's actually still playing too, because of that.
And if it has to be slip and slide drills like the Bears did, that's fine too. Speaking of, you
Those
have
Bears.
Caleb Williams. Nothing's changed. You don't get rid of the number 1 pick after a year, so it's Caleb Williams' job to lose. And actually, Tyson Bagent, I think, is a really fascinating name to watch, especially if he ends up getting a spot start or 2 throughout the year. Maybe Caleb gets dinged up a little bit and Bajent gets to play. If he plays well, I think there's going to be a major market out there for him as somebody who is a bit of a preseason darling. The Lions just paid Jared Goff. Packers just paid Jordan Love. Don't really see anything there. JJ McCarthy is the fascinating one to me. So you see any movement there?
No, I mean, it doesn't feel like there's going to be movement. It's just going to be interesting to see how that development goes. And obviously his play, like getting on the field, is what every Vikings fan wanted to see, what NFL fans wanted to see too. But this is a guy who was pretty raw, and like maybe sitting with a clipboard for a year is something that actually ends up benefiting him. This is not an injury that he could play with, but this is not a catastrophic injury that's going to set him back for the rest of his career. So maybe just taking that full redshirt year is not the worst thing in the world. He comes in with a real TJ Hawkinson who's not injured. Like he gets all the pieces back. He gets to play with that playbook fully absorbed and, feeling more confident in who he is as a quarterback. So maybe, I don't know that we have enough to go off of, but maybe this ends up being something that really actually helps him long term.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong way to develop a quarterback in the NFL, but there is a long history of success with the truly elite of the elite quarterbacks of sitting for a year. And, for every Justin Herbert, there's a Tom Brady, a Patrick Mahomes, an Aaron Rodgers, a Jordan Love. Like that process of sitting and learning, especially McCarthy's a very young player. Like you mentioned, he's raw. Like, don't put him in a situation where he is going to start developing bad habits. I'm not saying the injury is a good thing. It is not. And, even as a Packers fan, I wanted to see JJ McCarthy play this year and succeed. Mm-hmm. But maybe there is some positive to this, that he's not going to be rushed into action. And he's going to get that full year in the locker room and also in the film room, in the weight room. And he's going to have a chance to come back and be a really, really impactful year 2 guy.
What if Sam Darnold goes like scorched earth and like is good? Like what happens then? Like these are the scenarios that maybe we get a Baker Mayfield on our hands again with someone like Sam Darnold. That might be a little bit more wishful thinking than we're prepared for. But all right, well, that is the show for today. Thank you for joining us as we talk through these divisions in the NFC. Like and subscribe to the show, and we will be back to conclude the rest of the NFC really, really soon. So from the draft room to the gridiron, the Draft Fellows have got you covered. Until next time, stay tuned and stay in the game.